Just a further question in terms of the processing. So this cost is worked out in advance, I guess, on the basis of bookings or the like. If a club doesn't use that booking, do they get a credit? Is there some system in place there?
Yes, there is.
And there's obviously time around that. So you've actually got to
The
maintain
answer
a
was
database.
yes. The answer was yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to get a handle on the
Yep.
system, Mr.
And the
Chair.
answer was yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
No, it's all right. I wasn't sure whether we were doing questions or speaking to it from the... So I'll just wait until we actually are debating.
Yep, Councillor Brewer.
Thank you. Just trying to get a handle on the money that's trying to be recouped here, because to me, Mr. Chair, this seems like the bids administration fee debate all over again. So my question is, I hear the 181,000. How much are we in a monetary sense, in a dollar figure, are we trying to recover from the clubs for the 2 financial years or 2 calendar years or whatever they were that we didn't invoice? What's the number there? And secondly, how much are we trying to, how much are we anticipating we will gain in a financial sense from local boards through their LDI funding if we were to go down that track? So one, how much from local boards, how much from club, what's the total figure that we're trying to recoup here?
Through the Chair, the fees that are set within or the revenue target that is set within the annual plan is based on the average or the predicted revenue. It will of course vary from season to season based on changing demands and changing bookings. I do have a breakdown of the revenue target by board. Would you like me to read that out?
Well, I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Jane, but we're trying to recoup from sports clubs that they haven't budgeted for because they haven't been invoiced a historic number, and that historic number has been and gone, and so it must be there. It's not a forecast number; it's a historic number. What is that number across the clubs affected when we re-invoice them for 13, 14, 14, 15 or whatever? What does that give us in revenue, and what are we asking for in a forecast sense from local boards through their LDI for 15, 16, and collectively what is that number?
Through the Chair, the administrative error that was pointed out by our first speaker that related to some codes, not all, related to the part of the 2012 and 2013 season. We've met with the code affected and we're not seeking to recover those fees. That is a historic loss in the part of 2012-13. Charges were levied fully across all codes and clubs in the 2014 season. Those invoices are with those codes and clubs and are being received on a regular basis. They were late.
Okay, so what's the forecast amount, say, for 15-16 that you are anticipating that we get collectively from the local boards, if it was, and I don't think it will be, but if we went down the track of the LDI funding to make up for that shortfall? How much is that, where the 181,000 comes in?
That's correct. Through the Chair, the 181,000 is the cumulative total across the Central Isthmus, and that is broken down varying degrees from 31,000 to 41,000, depending on which board, based on what the kind of historical revenue stream is in those board areas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cashmore.
I think Cameron's question about mine. So the historical accounts have been written off, and now we're talking about the 15-16 years. So that's a very valid point. My other question is to the local boards and/or staff: were these items appearing as income or expenditure on local board budgets? Historically, they were. So there was knowledge at local boards that these items were. Okay, so they're shaking their head. So yeah,
if they were in the underlying assumptions in our line budget,
Yep.
but we've never received until this year a schedule of sports field charges to approve, and that's where we said no to the increase.
Never, ever in the 5 years.
So we had no idea of the underlying assumptions within the budget, none whatsoever.
Our board has received that in the past as part of our local board agreement process.
They must have asked for it.
yeah, so it's a bit of forensics potentially. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Lee.
Yes, I'm interested in the recommendations. The first one is pretty clear, and I guess it would be based on the principle of equity and the considerable effort the Auckland Council has gone into ensuring that our rates are equitable and equal and across the board, across the region. The second one doesn't really make sense to me. Could I have an explanation on 2? Do not remove sports field charges, but consider. What is the logic behind that? I would guess it would be either yes or no, would it not? This one seems like a maybe clause.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Essentially, it is a decision, an option here around the timing of a decision. So one is make a decision now to remove charges, and there's an immediate financial impact. The other one is not to remove charges now, but to consider it as part of the 16-17 annual plan, and that could be an informed discussion. It could include some reference to policy work around this. So it's deferring a decision from today.
It's not really convincing. It's either, one is pretty clear, yes or no. We have to make up our minds. The other one is a kind of a maybe, really a kicking for touch clause, really, isn't it? I think we have to, there's no good reason not to make the decision now one way or the other, is there not? No. Okay, thank you.
Mark, are staff considering charging Auckland-wide as an option going forward?
Through you, Mr. Chair. During 2012, this council committed heavily to invest in upgrading the capacity of sports fields across the region. So the Sports Field Capacity Development Program was a program in conceptual stage that was workshopped around all local boards and clusters during 2012. The issue of sports field charges being applied region-wide was part of that discussion, and I attended all of those cluster meetings, and as I recall it, there was a clear feeling that there was no political appetite to introduce sports field charges around the region. And since then we've considered the idea as part of the LTP preparations last year, and again felt that the feedback was there's no political appetite here. So in the absence of policy work to guide this, our recommendations are made at this point in time based on feedback from the central local boards.
Yep, thank you for the answer. That's quite clear. Right, well, we have the first amendment that was handed in, which is put by Councillor. Did you want to speak, George? Yes.
No, it's not a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to clarify this point that the accounts haven't been sent out or there hasn't been any billing. Is that correct for the last 2 years?
Through the Chair, just to reiterate that there was an administrative error that meant that some clubs and codes did not receive their charges for part of 2012 and 2013. That has been resolved, written off, and all charges were sent out for 2014 and are, at this point in time actually, we haven't yet sent out the charges for 2015, recognising that charges are generally sent out at the end of each season, so they're not normally due to go out until about September.
You know,
So
April.
Mr. Chairman, our problem is you've had them, they've gone away, and now you want to put them back. For heaven's sake, that's wrong.
So what's the... I just want to ask what
excuse me, wait a minute. Let's just be quite clear. They went away for some clubs. We've got to be quite clear there.
Most.
Well, just can we clarify that?
Through the Chair, the
Football.
The figures probably tell the cleanest story. The targeted revenue for the 14-15 year was 260,000. The
That's
amount
clause
received,
12, folks.
The amount received was 180,000. So you can see a substantial amount of invoices were sent out and were received. However, there was also a substantial gap that's fully acknowledged.
Councillor Wood. Any further questions?
What was the... You know, I'm just trying to get my head around what... And following up from Councillor Walker's question about what is the administrative cost of this? 180,000 revenue. What's the administrative cost to get that money in when you've got sports field officers who are booking and checking, and also the administrative office, back office people?
Through Mr Chair, as Jane mentioned, we have booking officers in each of our sort of geographic sectors anyway. So all sports field use is booked. So the primary purpose of managing that network of fields is to optimise their use. The majority of that officer time goes into the booking process. So there is a small portion of time for the officer in the central area related to generating invoices attached to those bookings, and therefore there is a transactional charge for each invoice. As Jane has also said, the majority of the revenue relates to seasonal code invoices for the sports codes, for the seasonal use of the fields, and for seasonal training use by clubs of their fields. That is well over half of that expected income. Balance of it relates to casual play, and there would be a charge per transaction around that. So overall, I think the percentage of time related to collecting the revenue is not significant.
So just follow up. I mean, I just want to clarify. Other TLAs in the old Auckland, across the region prior to Auckland Council coming in, they did have, in their past, have had sports field charges, and they phased them out because of the costs were outweighed the benefits. Is that right?
That's correct, and that is partly due to the size and value of the total revenue that was generated versus the cost to collect. So in the former Auckland City Council, it did stack up. There was sufficient revenue. It did warrant its continued collection.
Thank you.
Last chance for questions.
Just one. So if you are charging a code, for example, a soccer club that's on, when I visited last night, so Fred Taylor Park, that's a 680 players, etc., etc. They've got several fields. When they pay the code and then the user charges, basically they're tying up that council land for them, aren't they? No one else can use it? Pretty much. I mean, apart from the occasional dog walking around the edges is what I'm told. So in terms of the use, if you're looking at sports fields, it's not much use for casual users in some of those, is there? Or is there?
So I guess it's quite relevant just for context to think that we have over 4,000 parks across the region. 224 of those parks are sports parks, dedicated for sports use. And on those parks, we have over 800 sports fields. So it's actually a small percentage of the total land area dedicated to sport provision, hence the drive to increase and optimise usage on that land. So for that exclusive use in the central area, there has been a charging regime that recovers about 8% of the total cost. So it's quite nominal to start with. It gives some integrity to the booking system. That was probably one of the main reasons it was levied. But the way that the charge is applied, parent code, like Auckland Football Federation or Northern Football Federation, they were levied a charge for the seasonal competition use of that field. So that relates to the weekend component. And then during the week, typically it's about clubs booking training use in the evenings. So there's a seasonal charge relates to that. From the code level, it's a code decision whether they levy their member clubs, and therefore whether the clubs levied their membership in terms of recovering that cost.
And clearly they are, because
generally
clubs all over the region pay huge amounts of money to their regional source. So what I'm just trying to get at is, so if a club rooms that's owned by a club but sits on council land, do they have pretty much exclusive use of that?
We call it existing
land.
sort of home user rights. So a club that's domiciled on a park, generally in terms of the competition draw and the training regime, have some form of home user rights. So they get a first preference for booking and use of that site. So
do you find many, sorry, I'm through you, Mr Chairman, so do you find many other people would say, well, I'm going to go to Pars Park and I want to book, which is pretty much exclusive use for Orotia Football Club. Do they have pretty much free rein on what they can book, or is it very restricted, or do people not usually, because it is pretty much taken up with all the training nights and days and weekends? That's what I'm trying to get at. Do other people use these parks when you've got
so
clubs
again,
on them?
the principle is we're trying to optimise use of these 800 sports fields across the region. They are under significant pressure.
But in principle, but in practice, what happens?
In practice, we accommodate as much booking as we can, particularly on those synthetic pitches. Powers Park has a synthetic pitch.
Yeah.
And it would be receiving well over 30, 35 hours of use per week. Predominantly, if you have a large home-based club, they will soak up most of that demand.
Thank you. That's just what I want to know.
I could just clarify though a little bit. Most, if not many, parks actually have a summer club or a sport applying and a winter club.